We're here at the beautiful Windsor Castle in the...
United Kingdom.
And today we just finished our 2-hour lecture on branding and startup pitching to entrepreneurs, invited by the Rothschild Foundation. So it was an honor to be seated among some very talented individuals and people with just great connections and great networks. Anyway, I think we did well. I hope. How do you feel? We just finished a few hours ago.
What's interesting is actually like when you said from UK and one of the comments, and it was unintentional, was somebody was describing. He said, "And UK and Europe," and I was like, "My goodness, it's like
Brexit."
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like we're no longer like Europeans. It's like UK and Europe, which was interesting. What I liked actually was, no surprise, hearing you speak, because with this session,
I said that because I was just like, I don't know how to take that. Like what?
No. I mean, because the thing is, like,
what does that mean?
I liked the fact that you got to give examples and elaborate on them, because like when I've seen you speak recently, it's been at conferences, and at conferences, you know, you have your PowerPoint deck, and you pretty much. Here are some facts, here are some figures, and you have to do X, Y, and Z. But you were actually able to interact with the audience, and people were like throwing you questions like, yeah, but what about in my situation or in my culture, or like, you know, does a business school education matter to an entrepreneur? And we were able to debate different regions, whether that's the US or Europe or China.
Asia.
Yeah. So I liked that, and I liked like listening to you have to respond on the hoof, right?
Oh, okay. So the question and answer and having to think on my toes.
Basically.
Yeah. Actually, I like that because it's a good test. You want to sum up briefly what we talked about or what we went over?
So we didn't get to complete all of our slide deck, right?
So it was 2 hours, and we could have went for like 7 because we didn't get.
Yeah.
We just did not.
But it was
finish.
good because it wasn't that we were fumbling for words. It was that we were getting some interesting questions, and one of the things, to be honest with you, like when it comes to presentations, it's quite difficult to gauge what sort of audience you're going to get. So if someone says you're going to speak for 2 hours, like how many slides would you create for 2 hours? And you're kind of assuming like what. You don't know if people are going to resonate with the point that you're making. They're going to raise a question, like what you should elaborate on. So it was actually quite interesting that we got through less slides than I thought. And I left space because I know that you like to talk. I like to talk. And still there were these very specific questions. Like in particular, you know, if you're talking about branding and you have a corporate brand and a corporate identity, and you're talking about creating personal brands, like, and you're a founder, should your personal brand be the same as the company? Or should they be different? Should they overlap? And we were like debating, it depends on the sector, it depends on your personality. Then also like, you know, you being a psychology major, we had a bit of a chance to go into some psychology. And also I looked at some transactional analysis. So it was also trying to kind of look at things like, you know, everyone thinks that having a profile that's public is about just being open about everything, about being gregarious and like, hey, look at me and like me and all these sorts of things. And so we were getting to investigate, okay, well, what if you're not that outgoing? What if you're slightly introverted? What if you're like open-minded when it comes to looking at new knowledge, but not necessarily when it comes to, you know, pulling ugly faces and all that kind of stuff? Like, how do you build a brand in that context? And I found that interesting. And also just listening to the pitches from a lot of interesting different ideas and how they came from it being this light bulb moment or this eureka moment to then, okay, how do you make it into a more robust concept? And then I suppose where we're stepping in, which is how do you scale that up into a business, right? Like what makes it go global or international, or how you get funding, next round of funding, those sorts of things. That was interesting.
For me, what I thought was very intriguing from my own observations as an American with the Europeans, the British, and the Americans, is that we as Americans, I think we're natural salespeople, which can be a negative thing because it can be over the top. And we're so, like, we walk into a room and it's like, we're here, the party can start now. And it's a good thing to have that kind of presence, but it can be overbearing. And it does not allow for cultures and people who are not inclined to taking the initiative to start the conversation. And because Americans assert themselves in such a manner, everyone sort of falls back and says, well, whoa, I mean, if you're roaring, just keep roaring and we'll just listen. And it stifles ideas.
Yeah.
It stifles conversation and meaningful dialogues, because I see with Americans just being a bit overwhelming and controlling conversation and discussion, and speaking with such conviction when we live on an island and are pretty much not engaging other cultures, languages, regions, religions, like people on this side of the world.
Yeah.
In Africa, in Asia.
Okay, you mentioned Africa. That's interesting, because I was going to say that, like, there were more complicated conversations about America where people are saying, oh, I'm from the East Coast, or I'm from the West Coast, I'm from Philly, I'm from New York, I'm from California. And then quite quickly, there were some discussions where it's like, and this could benefit Africa.
Yeah,
like
a whole
Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, Morocco,
No, but that's another thing that Westerners, Americans, and you can just peep this out when people talk. For example, they'll say, I love traveling. I love going to England, Italy, Japan, Africa. It's like, how do you go from country? And you see a lot of Americans do this. A lot of people do this. It just goes, how do you go from, I like London, I like Italy, I like Tokyo, Africa, I want to go there too. It's like, wait, that's a whole continent.
I'm not got that Toto song in my head, Rain in Africa. But China was the other one, right?
Yeah.
Because
Jenny Wong with the Cambridge Accelerator, right? Is that the name of it?
Yeah. People found it too easy, I felt, to slip into the made in China thing, which is like you don't want to talk about your thing being made in China. And I raised a point which is like, well, hold up a minute. Like, China's very good at making whatever you want it to make, to whatever specification you make. You just have to be clear what it is that you want. They make everything from high quality to, fast, free, and cheap, right? And we can see that the growth in the luxury sector in China is showing that there are some credible Chinese brands coming. I had a paper on it a couple of years ago. Then you carried on and spoke in more detail about China, right? And people underestimating the way that China does business, the long game, and how that's going to have an influence on how they build brands as well, right?
Yeah.
Because you could argue that the first phase is like, if you've got everybody's products that you're making and you're getting gain from them and you're learning and you've got the audiences and the infrastructure, it's an alternative way of doing branding, right? Because let's say the American approach would be, I'll hold on to the brand and we can get you to do all the other things, right?
Is it safe to say that branding is something that was created by Americans?
According to American textbooks that we all studied at university and during our MBAs. Yeah, I mean, they talk about the idea of a brand being the cow with the heated iron going,
true.
And I disagree with that. But
so another thing for the Americans that were present, especially for them, is that when you start engaging other cultures, and you have to understand how they define race, class, liberty, freedom. Gender. That's the thing that I believe many Americans, in terms of how traveling can make them much more understanding of the global marketplace, because many Americans, I know as an American, all we do is we're looking just to attack our market. It's 350 million people. You killed it in America, you're good. Like, you don't have to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
But sometimes it becomes so saturated, and sometimes you're offering your product or service can do well in other cultures, that we talked about how you have to go and sit with the people and just culture watch.
Yeah.
And really insert yourself as an observer, speak to people, and speak to youth.
Yeah.
In regard to technology especially.
Because China's got 56 different tribes?
56, cities,
who are different, have different tribal structures.
Yeah, just their
language,
dialects.
Over 1 billion people.
Their cultures are different. Just like Jersey, someone in Jersey is going to act different from someone in Oregon.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
I said, yeah, like I know the difference. Like, to me, it's like, you're all American, right? The French got spoken about as well, right?
No, there were a lot. There were the French that were here,
Yeah.
and because the French, with their whole idea of secularism, them winning the World Cup, the global spotlight, the global spotlight being on them, how the argument was brought up that the African team from France won it, the Muslims won it for France. It is on the mind of people still. It's a still fresh concept.
But I also noticed that that gave people a sense of identity. Like the French were quite clear about saying, well, in France, or we the French do blah blah blah. The French would say blah blah blah, right? But they would talk like that. Whereas I think, like living in the UK or in England, we've toned it down a little bit. I think English people don't necessarily go, well, in England, this is what we do. Like in England, like, you know, kind of, there are a lot of people pulling your collar where you're saying, hold up a minute, like, when you talk about England, what sort of England do you mean? The North, we're different.
Yeah.
The South, if you've got family from the Indian subcontinent, or like, you know, but France seems to still have a strong, what came to it was there was a strong national identity.
Mainland Europe does.
Yeah.
When I was engaging with the different entrepreneurs and it reminded me of how sometimes you're so passionate about your idea and you're so close to the trees that you don't see the forest. And as outsiders, we're looking at the offering and going, you may want, and you see that, because I know this, right, as someone who started my own company, that, no, you don't understand because I've studied it. And that's why when there were people who were with us from, you know, very prestigious organizations and groups who were challenging them, and you can see that.
Yeah.
That making excuses, and you go, man, you know, that was a good question, or how come you can't back that up sufficiently? Because sometimes it's just a philosophical dialogue that's going on, but when someone who has a background in banking is asking for figures and you're stuttering, then it doesn't fare well.
So that was one of the themes that came out, right? Like, I think that we spent a fair bit of time talking about data and trying to look at data from several different angles, drilling deep, understanding what's going on, and really like getting those numbers right. You know, like, so if you're going to say that there's X amount of people in the world, like, okay, but what does that actually mean? Or what are they doing? What region? Like, but drilling down into those numbers, that, yeah, it's hard in a 3-minute pitch because you don't want to kind of get too deep and lose the main headline story, which is like, you know, buy into me or something. But I think more so than at previous talks, we spent a fair bit of time talking about numbers and percentages and the implications of those and whether that's scalable. And then, like, if I think about one number, right, the 40-hour week rule, right? So I was saying that, you know, a lot of businesses decided by a simple question, which is, could I hang with this person for 40 hours a week? Do I really want to work with them for 40 hours a week for several years? And I also extended that to social media engagement. Like, you know, people talk about how many posts should they do a week. But you know what? If people are liking your posts, if you're funny, if they're eclectic, if they're on a variety of topics.
If they're insightful, if they're well written, if they're deep, people are going to follow.
So we were trying to get people to think like, almost like a magazine features editors, where you think over a year or over several months, what are going to be your stories? And how do you shake it up and have varied stories? So even if you are talking about fast fashion, every post is not fast fashion. Fast fashion, you see fast fashion is the way forward. You see I told you so, and this is what my company does. It doesn't hurt to talk about other things that are kind of seemingly unconnected and trying to make that connection. I think that's really important.
Another thing as an American, as a British, is look, I think the British, I think the Americans need to be grateful for the fact that they were born in a country that speaks the language of business. Because when you see these entrepreneurs who are not native English speakers presenting well, there's an accent, you know they're not native, but they're presenting excellently. I have to just tip my hat to them because they understand the nuance of language, They're coming from a different culture, a different background, a different continent, and they're having to play the game on our terms.
Yeah.
And to me, I have to tip my hat. I just give so much more respect. Even if they have to like pull out their iPad or their notes real quick, to me that's cool because it's better than my Dutch.
Because it's not just the language, it's the fact that, you know, you use a lot of American slang.
Yeah.
I use maybe technical terms. I definitely crack jokes that maybe not everybody would get outside of kind of British culture or whatever it is. And we just assume that people will find out and get with it. But
I applaud the non-native English speakers because...
Such as ourselves.
They just...
No, I'm joking.
They're able to see, like, I didn't even get that joke. I'm like, why is he cutting in?
No, he's like, hold up a minute. I am a native English speaker. Like,
no.
you know.
Oh, wait. Did I say something wrong?
No. I was joking. Like you said, you applaud the non-native English speakers. And I was like, such as ourselves. Like, because sometimes we go to countries and they assume that we're non-English natives.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like I had a Q&A in one country and one person asked me, he goes, okay, I have one question for you. Where did you learn to speak English? Because your accent is very good, like an English person.
Well, the BBC.
Yeah.
The BBC. So these are the things that, I mean, any other insights that you had that I'm actually, not even so much talking about what we talked about, but some of the things that I picked up because being on this side of the planet, away from my tribe, it's interesting to see how people engage the language. Branding, which is claimed to be an American idea, concept that was born, the internet that was born in America, and seeing how people didn't have to go through the versions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the internet, and how some of them just went from 1, 2, 3 all the way to 10, where they have no relationship to email, right? And all the relationship is built on WhatsApp and texting.
I'm actually thinking about this, and I'm thinking that, what's a blessing is also a curse, perhaps, because when we've gone to Asia, people have been really open-minded about absorbing new ideas and suggestions because they know that they're playing catch-up. Like, it's like if you said, do you know what, email is dying, it's all about WhatsApp, they go, okay, fine. But I know that, for example, if I say something like that in like England, they go, well, you see, in my industry, or like, because we spoke about making excuses, or like if you said, like, you've got to change the way that you look at business, it's very easy if you're from a developed nation, right, to think, okay, these guys maybe don't get what we're doing. But we tried to ask people to have an open mind and just to absorb information and then just to kind of sit on it and reflect, like, maybe there's something in there. Because you don't know, like the amount of companies that have to change several years down the line, like WhatsApp. We were talking about how a lot of business deals are being done in WhatsApp. Football agents who want to poach footballers. It doesn't make sense to drop an email or to phone up like, hello, Manchester United. Yeah, I'm an agent and I'm looking to hire whatever. WhatsApp makes perfect sense. Like free phone calls, cross time zones, contracts, PDFs, images. So I thought it was interesting to have those discussions and just to get feedback because we knew the nationality of the people in the room and just to see how different people reacted to kind of those ideas that we threw out there.
Yeah. I think that's all I have. I don't want to belabor this vlog.
Anything else that you, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you...
See, he wants to make it long again. So he wants to shoot for another 45-minute vlog, and I'm like, look, we're at 18 minutes, 17 minutes. I think we're good, man.
Okay,
I think
so the final message is this.
Go ahead.
Branding is really important. It's the most important aspect of what it is that you're probably currently doing. And you should be very careful about handing over that responsibility to somebody else. You at least need to know the technical terms and how to do branding, right? Whether that's your identity, your image, your corporate identity, the products and services. Too many people go looking for somebody else to do that thing. That's the thing that's going to make you the most money.
Yeah.
So I think that was a key message as well. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the reason why $10 trainers can be $100 trainers, as we always say. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up and not torture these guys anymore. Thank you so much for tuning in. Signing out from the Windsor Castle, invited by the Rothschild Foundation here in the UK. Take care. Be awesome. Peace. Coming to you from the beautiful Windsor Castle in the United Kingdom. You gotta fill in that blank, bro.
Okay. I didn't know where you... Okay, fine.